Everyone is watching the wrong player. Caitlin Clark walks into the Indiana Fever, and the entire basketball world loses its mind. The ratings, the sellouts, the sponsorships, the arguments, all of it. Every camera in every arena pointed at one person, and that's exactly what two players were counting on. While you were watching the Sun, Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hull were doing something far more dangerous than going viral. They were evolving, quietly, deliberately.
Cunningham, another three. Oh my goodness, Sophie Cunningham!
With the kind of ruthless self-awareness that most professional athletes never find, because most professional athletes never have to. But when Caitlin Clark enters your league, you adapt or you disappear. Those are the only two options. And these two women looked at a system that was rewriting the rules of their survival in real time, and they didn't complain. They didn't resist. They weaponized it. This is not a story about Caitlin Clark, and this is a story about what happens in the shadow of greatness. And the two players who turned that shadow into the most calculated career move in the modern history of women's basketball. Let's put your knowledge to the test. Time for today's quiz. Quiz: who dominated the headlines when she joined the Fever? A. Lexi Hull. B. Sophie Cunningham. C. Caitlin Clark. D. Aaliyah Boston. Think you've got it? Drop your answer in the comments. I'll reveal the truth soon. Cunningham's radical transformation. To understand how extreme this adaptation has been, you need to understand who Sophie Cunningham was before this offseason. For 6 years, Cunningham built her reputation on one thing: physicality.
Sophie steps into the three.
She was the enforcer. She was the player who set bone-jarring screens, absorbed punishment in the paint, and physically retaliated against every veteran in the league who tried to rough up the Fever's rookie point guard. At 165 pounds, and she carried the structural mass of a player built for war in the trenches. She threw her body into collisions that would make most players flinch. She played with a controlled aggression that made her one of the most respected and feared role players in the entire WNBA. That was her identity. That was her brand. That was the thing that kept her on the floor and kept her relevant in a league that discards players the moment they stop being useful. And then she looked at the numbers from last season, watched the film, studied the way Caitlin Clark's offense actually operates at full speed, and she made a decision that most athletes would never have the courage to make. She destroyed the thing that defined her and rebuilt herself from scratch. Not because she wanted to, not because someone told her to, because she understood, with the cold clarity of a player who has been in this league long enough to know how fast it discards people, she knew that the version of herself that had worked for 6 years was no longer the version that this team needed.
Caitlin, man, she's a phenomenon.
She'll be the biggest female star.
She's the best female collegiate player.
And rather than wait for the coaching staff to figure that out and replace her, she replaced herself first. It's time. The quiz answer is revealed. Did you comment on the right choice? The correct answer is C. Did you get it right? Drop your guess in the comments. Let's see who's paying attention. Sophie Cunningham dropped from 165 pounds to 148.5. 16.5 pounds of body mass gone. For a professional athlete who is already operating at elite physical conditioning, that is not a casual diet adjustment. That is a complete biological restructuring. That is stripping your body down to its most efficient possible frame and accepting that the player you were last year no longer has a place in the system you are entering this year. And the reasoning behind it reveals just how deeply Cunningham understands the Caitlin Clark economy. Cunningham is currently rehabilitating a torn medial collateral ligament in her knee. When you are recovering from a severe ligament injury and simultaneously preparing to play in the fastest-paced...
Oh, and Cunningham is down. My goodness. Sophie Cunningham hit the floor hard and...
highest possession offense in the entire league, every single pound of excess mass becomes a liability. The physics are brutal and non-negotiable. Each additional pound exponentially increases the force placed on the knee joint during high-speed deceleration, during the sudden stops and explosive changes of direction that the Clark system demands on every single possession. Cunningham looked at the biomechanical equation and made the only rational decision available. She stripped down to the leanest, most aerodynamic version of herself that her body could sustain without sacrificing the strength she needs to compete. But this was not just about protecting her knee. This was about understanding what the Clark offense actually rewards. Caitlin Clark's transcendent court vision breaks opposing defenses before they can even get set. She throws full court outlet passes.
Clark looking to shake free. Clark, step back three, is good!
With a speed and accuracy that nobody in the history of women's basketball has ever matched. If you are a wing player on the Indiana Fever and you leak out in transition the instant the defensive rebound is secured, you are virtually guaranteed to receive a pinpoint 50-foot pass that leads directly to an uncontested layup or a wide-open corner three. But the window is measured in fractions of a second. You have to beat your defender down the floor. You have to be faster, lighter, and more explosive than the person chasing you. And at 165 pounds, Cunningham knew she was losing that race too often. She also watched what happened to Aaliyah Boston during the first half of last season. Boston came into the year carrying a bit more weight than the system required, still tuned to the slower, more methodical post-up game she had dominated in college. The result was a brutal first month, where Boston looked visibly gassed, struggling to keep pace with the relentless chaos of her new point guard's tempo. It was not until Boston physically adapted, until she played herself into peak cardiovascular condition, that she finally unlocked what she was capable of inside the new system.
When Aaliyah Boston has suffered a season-ending injury at Unrivaled, man, now she will not be able to fulfill.
Cunningham watched that adjustment period and decided she was not going to waste a single game going through it. She made the adaptation before training camp even started. She showed up lean, fast, and ready to run. And she is returning as a catch-and-shoot weapon who hit 43% of her three-pointers last season. Now capable of getting to her spots faster than she ever has in her career. When Clark throws the transition pass this season, Cunningham intends to be the first player waiting in the corner. Every single time. Politics over performance. Physical transformation is only half the equation in Indianapolis right now. The other half is a political minefield that could determine whether this franchise contends for a championship or implodes before the All-Star break. And everything hinges on one decision that the new head coach has not yet made public. A decision that, depending on which way it falls, I will either validate the sacrifices that players like Cunningham and Hull have made or render them meaningless overnight. The front office hired Stephanie White as the new head coach this offseason. White is a veteran coach with deep ties to the league's established players, particularly the veterans who have been in the system longer than Clark has. That coaching hire introduced a massive and genuinely dangerous variable into the team's offensive identity. There is a real and credible concern among the people who study this roster.
New Fever head coach Stephanie White returns to Indiana with one of the most legendary basketball resumes.
That White could attempt to implement a traditional, veteran-heavy rotation. One that prioritizes isolation scoring, slows down the pace, and tries to distribute touches more evenly across the roster in an effort to keep the locker room happy. On paper, that sounds reasonable. In practice, it would be an act of competitive self-destruction. You do not take the most explosive offensive engine in the history of women's basketball and throttle it down to make role players feel comfortable. You build the entire system around that engine, and you find players who can run at its speed. This is exactly where Lexi Hull becomes the most important roster decision of the entire season. Hull is the prototype for what the modern 3-and-D wing should look like in women's basketball. She does not demand the ball in isolation. She does not need plays called for her to feel valued.
Lexi Hull has been here in the first half. That was her 8th shot attempt, and she's 6 of 8 from the floor.
She does not complain about usage rates or touches. She plays suffocating, relentless perimeter defense. She stretches the floor with high-efficiency shooting, and she runs the floor with a motor that never stops. When Hull is on the court alongside Clark and Cunningham, the offensive geometry of the Indiana Fever becomes almost mathematically impossible to defend. 3 shooters who can space the floor, and 3 defenders who can switch assignments, and a point guard in the middle of it all, who sees passing lanes that do not exist for anyone else on the planet. But coaching staffs have a long and painful history of overthinking the obvious. There is always the temptation to give minutes to the veterans who have been loyal to the organization, to the players with bigger names and longer resumes who expect a certain level of playing time, regardless of whether the numbers support it. Last season, the coaching staff experimented with lineups that benched Hull in favor of slower, higher usage veterans who disrupted the spacing and clogged the lanes that Clark needed to operate. Every time it happened, the offense stalled. The ball movement died. Clark was forced into contested isolation possessions that negated everything that makes her special. And every time Hull returned to the starting five, the system snapped back into gear. The passing lanes reopened. Well, the floor spacing stretched the defense to its breaking point. The transition game came alive. The data is not ambiguous. The film is not debatable. Hull in the starting lineup alongside Clark and Cunningham produces the best version of this team by a significant margin.
Most seasons end on a loss, so it's really hard and challenging, but when you sit back and think about our year, we just exceeded expectations.
The question is whether Stephanie White will follow the data or follow the politics. And that question is going to define the Indiana Fever's entire season. Because in the Caitlin Clark economy, the margin for error is razor thin. One wrong lineup decision, one unnecessary concession to a veteran ego, and the entire machine breaks down. Orbiting the superstar. Now here is where this story takes a turn that most sports analysts are completely missing. While the fans argue about starting lineups and the Players Association negotiates over the collective bargaining agreement, a Lexi Hull is quietly executing one of the most sophisticated off-court business maneuvers in the history of the WNBA. And the strategy behind it reveals something profound about the economics of proximity to a generational superstar. Historically, role players in women's basketball have been almost entirely dependent on their league salaries to survive. They do not get the multi-million-dollar shoe deals.
Basketball superstar is about to sign a Nike endorsement deal worth $28 million.
They do not land the national television commercials. The massive endorsement economy that sustains the biggest names in the sport simply does not trickle down to the players standing next to them. Role players fight for the financial scraps, supplement their income playing overseas during the offseason, and hope that the league eventually negotiates a CBA that makes their base salary livable. That has been the reality for decades. But Lexi Hull just identified a loophole in the modern attention economy that could change the financial trajectory of role players across every professional sport. Hull is launching a direct-to-consumer cosmetics brand called Fora, specifically designed for high-performance athletes. On the surface, that might sound like just another athlete-side project, another celebrity name slapped on a product line that will quietly disappear in 18 months. But the business strategy underneath it is genuinely brilliant, and it only works because of one specific variable that almost nobody in the sports media landscape has properly analyzed. Lexi Hull plays next to Caitlin Clark. She occupies the most valuable piece of real estate in the entire women's sports economy, the space directly adjacent to the most watched player on the planet. In the traditional direct-to-consumer business model, the single most expensive and most dangerous cost is customer acquisition. You have to spend enormous amounts of money on digital advertising, on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok campaigns, just to get a potential customer to look at your product for 3 seconds. Most direct-to-consumer brands burn through millions of dollars in advertising spend before they ever turn a profit. And the vast majority of them never turn a profit at all. The economics are brutal. But Hull does not have to spend a single dollar on advertising. She does not have to buy a single impression. She already has them. Every time she steps onto the court alongside Caitlin Clark, millions of people are watching. Every time she walks through the pregame tunnel, every time she appears in a postgame interview, every time she posts on social media, she is generating organic, high-engagement impressions that would cost a traditional brand millions to replicate. And the Indiana Fever fan base is massive, intensely loyal, and disproportionately engaged with the players who support and defend the franchise superstar.
Iowa's Caitlin Clark has become a national phenom, and some fans say they went the extra mile just to watch her play here.
Hull has positioned herself perfectly inside that ecosystem, And now she is converting that attention into a private business asset that she owns entirely. This is the Caitlin Clark halo effect operating at its most sophisticated level. Clark generates the attention. The spotlight follows her everywhere she goes, from the arena to the airport to the grocery store. And the smart players standing in her orbit are not waiting for the league to pay them what they are worth. They are not sitting at the negotiating table hoping for incremental salary increases that still will not cover a mortgage in most American cities. They are building independent revenue streams that capture the economic overflow of being next to the biggest brand in women's sports. Sophie Cunningham has already leveraged her visibility into commercial deals with national brands. Now Hull is going a step further, skipping the corporate sponsors entirely, cutting out every middleman and building a direct-to-consumer company that she controls from top to bottom. She is not asking for a bigger slice of someone else's pie. She is baking her own. The Clark divide. Here is the uncomfortable truth that nobody in the WNBA wants to confront. Whilst the league is splitting into two groups right now, and the dividing line has nothing to do with talent, it has nothing to do with draft position or years of experience or how many all-star appearances are on your resume. The dividing line is adaptation. On one side, you have the players who looked at the Caitlin Clark economy and understood what it demanded. They changed their bodies. They changed their playing styles. They changed their business strategies. They stopped fighting the new reality and started building inside of it. Sophie Cunningham stripped 16 pounds off her frame, optimized her cardiovascular engine, and turned herself into a transition weapon perfectly calibrated for the fastest offense in the league. Lexi Hull locked down her role as the defensive anchor and floor spacer that the system requires, and then she launched a direct-to-consumer brand that converts her proximity to a generational superstar into independent wealth. And these are not players who got lucky. These are players who saw the future clearly, accepted what it required, and then did the hard, unglamorous work of transforming themselves to meet it. On the other side, you have the players who are still complaining, the ones who resent the attention Clark receives, the ones who refuse to change their playing styles and demand that the system bend around them instead of the other way around. The ones who think seniority entitles them to minutes and touches regardless of what the data says. Those players are going to be phased out, not because they lack talent. Many of them are phenomenally skilled, but because talent without adaptation is worthless in a league that is evolving this fast. The WNBA in 3 years is going to look nothing like the WNBA today. It is going to be faster, more athletic, more commercially sophisticated, and far less patient with players who cannot keep up. The roster spots will go to the players who figured that out early. The rest will be watching from their couches wondering what happened. Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hull figured it out early. They did not wait for permission. They did not wait for the league to hand them an opportunity. They did not sit around hoping the collective bargaining agreement would solve their financial problems or that a coaching staff would build the offense around their preferences. They looked at the landscape, identified exactly what it rewarded, and then they rebuilt themselves to claim it. Cunningham sacrificed the identity she had spent 6 years building because she understood that the old version of herself did not fit the new world. Hull took a role that most players would consider thankless, the defensive specialist who never gets her name in the headlines, and turned it into the foundation of a personal business empire worth more than any endorsement deal the league could offer her. When that is not just smart basketball, that is elite professional survival, and it is the blueprint that every role player in every professional sport should be studying right now. The Caitlin Clark economy is real, and it is accelerating. Every week, somewhere inside this league, a roster decision is being made. A veteran is being phased out. A role player is reinventing herself. A coach is drawing up a system that didn't exist 2 years ago. Because 2 years ago, it didn't need to. Sonner, this is what disruption actually looks like from the inside. Not the highlight reels, not the endorsement deals. The quiet, unglamorous, high-stakes game happening beneath all of it, where careers are won and lost not on talent alone, but on the willingness to see the future before it arrives. Cunningham made the bet. Hull is making her case. And somewhere in that fever locker room, the real season hasn't even started yet. The question was never whether Caitlin Clark would change this league. The question is, who is changing themselves fast enough to survive her?